We'll call the meeting to order. So this is the June 29th, 2023 executive meeting of council. We're going to begin with a public hearing. We have Aaron, our planner here, who is going to, you're going to give a little presentation, I assume, Aaron?
Yep, I can just share my screen anytime now.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, is everybody able to see?
Yes. Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
Sorry.
I can't, the way that it pops up, I can't actually see like if there's any nodding or stuff. I can only hear comments right now while I have my screen sharing on. Okay, so yes, this is for the development agreement to permit a warehouse and carpentry shop at 30 Spinney Road in Lower Argyle. Just to recap the site here, it is a site outlined in yellow. It's, of course, the former school location. Surrounding property uses in the area are kind of a mix of residential. You can see the wharf above. There's a smattering of kind of commercial, industrial, and resource uses in the broader neighborhood. There is a residential dwelling just to the north here, another residential dwelling to the south and across the street, and then some undeveloped parcels. The site itself has two buildings which were formerly attached but are no longer. Their applicant has made modifications to the building to separate the two and add additional fire separation building improvements. There is an existing easement across the property. You can kind of see in the bottom here if you just can follow my cursor, which grants access to the residential dwelling to the west. That won't be affected by the proposed agreement at all, the development agreement at all. So what the application is actually for is to use those two existing buildings at this time. One of them is currently being used for a warehouse for bulk water storage, and the property owner would like to subdivide the property and allow additional storage uses and potentially a carpentry workshop there as well. So the property is owned by Southbound Trade Force, and they're the ones applying for the development agreement. It's about a 9-acre site. Their property owner at this time isn't proposing any additional accesses to the one property, and I'll show you the subdivision plan in just a minute, but there will be another access added to the property being subdivided off. Current uses, I said, are bulk water storage, and I'll just flip to the site plan and the subdivision site plan here now, and you can see the proposed subdivision. So again, this is the entire site. There is these existing driveway accesses now. They're proposing to add a new driveway access for the lot that will be subdivided off just south of the building here. This site has existing septic and an on-site well. Anything that would require connectivity for this lot to septic would have to be approved through, of course, Nova Scotia Environment. Yeah. Sorry, the screen's freezing here. Just one sec. Right, there we go. So for development agreements, the coastal community zone, the intent of that, the zone and designation, both is to allow for a broad range of residential, commercial, and industrial uses, as well as some resource uses in the area. So in looking at the development agreement, you look at the enabling policy of the municipal planning strategy, and you can see here that it's policy 3.3.7, which does allow these types of uses, carpentry shop, and the warehouse distribution and sales in this zone by development agreement. And then in the zone itself, you can see here just that DA denotes the development agreement requirement. So in looking at the policy and evaluating whether or not council feels it's appropriate use of the site, we're really looking at what the policy for the coastal community designation is. And again, it's really to allow a broad range of uses, but to manage any potential land use conflicts inherently between some residential and particularly industrial uses, or also with residential and agricultural, there can sometimes be land use conflicts that arise. So the development agreement process is one way of kind of managing those land use conflicts. So looking at the criteria in considering development agreements, this list here is the criteria from the municipal planning strategy. It just looks at, again, what's the financial impact on the municipality? And in this case, it is an existing buildings on an existing lot, adequacy of sewer, water, or on-site services. So there are existing on-site services. It won't be connected to municipal services. It looks at the impact on the surrounding environment. terms of things like soil erosion, siltation of water courses, and adequacy of storm drainage. Again, there's no further expansion proposed at this time of the site, so the site's staying largely unchanged other than that additional driveway. But the development agreement does allow for future expansion, and at that time, these criteria would be looked at again. But right now, the situation really isn't changing. And is the site suitable in terms of the grade, the soils, wetlands, rights of way? So I did mention there is that right of way, but that will be protected through this use. There's no impact on the proposed use to that, and no water courses, no wetlands on the property itself. As it is a light industrial development, there is likely to be any significant impact on school capacity or recreation facilities or community programming. The road network is already in place, and the province is the traffic authority for this, and they have signed off on the change of use and driveway access for this proposed development. And then looking at, again, the building character and architectural design, well, this is, of course, the existing school buildings, and there's no architectural changes proposed at this time. So for the proposed uses in the development agreement itself, so this development agreement for this site adds the warehouse and carpentry shop uses, in addition to the uses that are already allowed as of right in the coastal community zone. And the as of right uses tend to be some of the commercial uses, such as offices, things of that nature, service, small engine repair, things like that, in addition to single detached dwellings and semi-detached dwellings. So this would keep those uses that are already allowed and then add in this carpentry use and warehouse use. As I mentioned, this proposed development agreement does allow for the expansion of these uses, and that includes the warehouse and carpentry shop uses or any of those underlying already permitted uses, provided that they are within an enclosed building and that they also meet the land use bylaw requirements. So if the property owner chose to expand at a later point in time, that expansion, as I mentioned, would have to be in an enclosed building, and there are screening provisions. So parking, loading, and open storage areas, well, it would have to be screened from adjacent residential properties, as well as it limits what can actually happen in the yards that are adjacent to residential properties. So as you can see here, the land use bylaw doesn't allow exhausting or freezer fans or outdoor machinery related to manufacturing or warehousing operations in those side yards that are adjacent to the residences. And they would also have to meet the industrial use setbacks. So those are the proposed uses, the proposed terms and conditions of the development agreement, kind of relate to this specific type of development on this specific property. And for this one, there's lighting provisions, which simply kind of say that the lighting is to be directed away from adjacent properties, that it has those full cutoff fixtures. That just means that the light shines down, not up and not sideways. It's kind of a shielded. It talks about the color of the temperature, and that's that of the light temperature. So that's just looking at the warmer lights, the cooler blue, kind of brighter, harsher lights aren't permitted, and that the lighting be connected to an automated timer. So they don't stay on all night. It's motion sensor or automated timer. There are maintenance provisions, and that's simply just that it should be kept in good and tidy repair and in a usable condition. There's a nuisance clause that just says that any uses occurring on this site shouldn't result in noise, dust, radiation, or odor emissions that cause a safety hazard or ongoing nuisance, and that the waste be screened from adjacent properties, and that there's waste management provisions in place. Other things that are typically covered in the development agreement relate to conformance with other regulations. So nothing in here excuses you from complying with other regulations, and usually if there's a conflict, the higher or more stringent one would apply. It does enable the development officer to grant variances in the future should the applicant want to change a front setback or height or anything like that. You'd be able to do that, but you'd have to do that through a written agreement and potentially through an amendment, a significant amendment, which would require public hearing. Talks about timeframes, so how long the developer has to sign and how long it's good for. If they don't sign in the required time, then it kind of reverts back to the development agreement, and then also timelines for getting any required development permits or occupancy permits, things of that nature. And then it does talk about both substantive matters and non-substantive matters. So non-substantive matters can be changed just by agreement through both written agreement through both parties. So that would be the municipality and the property owner. Those relate to timing, parking, signage, accessory buildings, things like that. Any larger amendments, like adding a new use or substantially, increasing the height or looking at variances, some of those types of things, those would all be through a substantive amendment process, which is same process that you're going through tonight, where there would be a public hearing and opportunity for public input. So the recommendation that is before council is to approve entering into a development agreement to permit a warehouse, self-storage facility, and or carpentry shop at 30 Spinney Road, as set out in the attachment A to the report, which is, of course, that draft development agreement, and require that an agreement must be signed by the property owner within 3 months or any extension granted by council. In just terms of the process, so this did go to public information meeting and PAC back in May. Council had the initial consideration there, which was also to set the public hearing date, which is where we're at tonight. So following public hearing and the public comments, council would make their decision, approval, refusal. Depending on that, the notice, if they should approve, the notice would go in the local newspaper. At that time, that would begin a 14-day appeal period. So as you're aware, development agreements can be appealed, either approvals or refusals by any interested parties. And then when the appeal period closes, or should no appeals be registered, then the municipality could actually enter into the agreement and it would be signed by the municipality and the property owner and then registered on the property title. So that agreement stays with the property. Should the property be subdivided, like it, as in this case it's being proposed, it would end up on both property titles. And if the properties were to change hand at any point in time, the development agreement would still be registered until such time as the municipality or property owner agreed to discharge it. Yeah, happy to take any questions on this or hand it over for public comment.
Thank you, Erin. Any questions or comments from anybody on council? Any questions or comments from the public? We have a couple of people in the gallery. No? Okay. Scott, was there anything Facebook related? No? Oh, sorry, Scott. Other Scott. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to share with council that part of this process is to notify people that are living within 152 meters from the site that we're talking about. And we did that, and I did receive a concern from a concerned resident around the lighting on the building. That she said it's might be too light or flashing in the sky, and I know the DA addresses that. Aaron just went through that, so I just wanted to make you aware that I did get a concern from a resident around that, but the DA does address that concern. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I don't see any Aaron, so I was, oh, sorry. Oh, come on up to the mic.
Come up to the
Come
mic.
on.
Can you give me a name?
I don't have the name. She gave me the address, but I don't know exactly which one it would be.
The person that's going to be most affected by lighting
Should be at the mic.
Come up to the mic, please.
Sure.
Have a seat
Yeah.
at the chair. And you'll turn the mic on.
Right there.
Thanks, well. Thank you. Thank you. So the person that's most affected by lighting would be the person sitting behind me here. And I've already made provisions, and he can verify that I've changed the light. The lights can be monitored and brought down to the lumens. So I lowered the lumens on that. He seems to be very happy with that. And so I don't know of any other person that would have a problem with that, but I can certainly make that difference made known.
Okay.
Just wanted to
Yep.
verify that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Digdon.
Thank you. The only thing I'm wondering if, in case, and not in this case by no means, or in this case or any other case, I guess, should these people be presenting their thoughts and that in writing that we can all see it and signing the bottom of it if they do have a complaint or a concern? Just wondering out loud,
Yeah,
I guess.
no, that's a good question. If that's the wish of council, I could have definitely shared that with council. It was an email signed.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson?
Yes, as a neighboring property owner, I have no objections, and I've never heard anything from anybody. Nobody's approached me either favorable or negatively on this, so it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Surratt?
Just something on that, what Councillor Digdon said. Wouldn't that complaint go to the PAC if there was a complaint to the PAC? And maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but usually when the PAC recommends it, which I see they're recommending this, they've looked at it, and to me, once it goes through the PAC, if they've accepted that, I'm all set with it, but that doesn't mean everybody is. To me, for me, it's a rubber stamp unless I see a red flag, because that's why I feel that's the PAC's job, that they bring that to us, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
Good question, Councillor Surratt. So to answer that, unfortunately, this person was only notified because of the process that we're doing right now is that we only notified the resident for the public hearing. So the PAC already received that, already had the meeting before we actually notified. So, but it's a point well taken that maybe we should look at changing the process and advising the people ahead of the PAC so that they could make their comments then and could be shared at the PAC meeting.
That's a good point. Councillor Sonia?
This is a different kind of question, I guess. Every time we change the land use bylaws, it's usually from residential to what's the word I'm looking for? Industrial or something like that. Can that be reversed, assuming, let's say this school right now, what it was a school, the project would be abandoned, given up, and I buy it, you buy it, someone buys it to build a house. Can that be changed to residential? It's just a curious question, I guess.
Go ahead. See you.
So in this case, in this instance, well, there's the general and then there's the specific. In this specific case, it's a development agreement. So the agreement exists as long as the developer is developing that particular thing. So if the zoning hasn't changed in that particular area, if the zoning allows residential to happen and that developer either decides not to develop anymore or decides to sell the property to a third party to do residential, as long as the zoning was in place, it could do that. It could do that. In other instances, not this specific case, but in other cases where you have a zone change, in zone change is a bit more complicated because it's always harder to go from residential to commercial because usually commercial has nuisances that housing typically doesn't have, or at least you hope it wouldn't have the same. So in a zoning situation, both a zoning and then rezoning, you would have to rezone that back to a residential if it was specific for industrial or some other use. So an example, there are industrial uses and marine industrial uses in the municipality that are specifically zoned for that purpose. It's designed to attract that kind of business in that kind of area. Because we're rural and mixed, it can vary. So in that particular instance, if it was a zoning change, that's a predominantly residential area anyway. You still would go through the same process, but you would have to unzone, I guess, change the zone back. Development agreement is far easier to deal with because the contract just ends and the zoning hadn't changed in the first place. So then that might be an easier situation. It can be changed. One is harder than the other. Okay. Generally speaking, yeah. I'm sure that Aaron may have more intelligent insight on that.
Thank you.
Just one distinction I just wanted to make for this particular situation. So yes, as Alain has explained, that is the process. But in this case, the way that development agreement is actually drafted is to allow those base uses that are allowed in the existing zone, that coastal community zone. And that zone does allow for low density residential use as of right. So say the property, this gets registered on title, property sells, next person wants to do something else with the land, they would have if they didn't discharge the development agreement, they could still do these uses that are in the DA plus whatever is already allowed in the coastal community zone. So without even amending this DA, you would be allowed to do residential uses for this case. Some other development agreements restrict it to only the uses that are listed in the development agreement and don't list the underlying zone. So it really depends on what type of use you're proposing and how much flexibility you want to give in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Okay. Seeing none, we will conclude that part of our public hearing,
Except for one.
except for one.
We did
Sorry.
get a comment on Facebook.
Okay.
So it would have to do with maintenance of the current facility
Okay.
versus the new. I'm not going to repeat the question word for word, but I would say that the development agreement will address the maintenance and the facility maintenance of the development. So regardless of the condition of that property today, it will measure the maintenance of that property moving forward. I think that if maintenance is always a matter of public view, right? So some may find lobster traps particularly unappealing, and most fishermen would strongly disagree with that. So so I would say that in the case where somebody may feel that it is an unsightly premise before or after, before there's usually a complaints process for something like that if there's one before. But if there's one after, well, then you have a development agreement that actually has a stronger connection to and a stronger obligation to the developer to make sure that that maintenance is appropriate. That's so that I hope that answers the question. Like every property is subject to a complaint. If my, front lawn is dirty and people don't like it, they can complain to the municipality, and that can go under dangerous or unsightly. And of course, as you already know, our officer takes a look and he makes a decision based on the situation that may be in agreement with the complainant or in disagreement with the complainant. So if you're concerned about maintenance moving forward, the maintenance is actually at a higher, you actually are at a higher level of expectation with this development agreement than you were before. I know that's not the question you asked, but it was a question that was asked.
Thank you. Councillor Digdon?
Thank you. And just a little bit further on that, any of the development agreements I've seen go through here, or the rezoning or whatever, there's always that clause in there that the development of this agreement shall comply with the requirements of MODA's land use bylaws. So that would, like, noise, pollution, lighting, anything like that. Like, it's always in the agreement. So there's always that safeguard for anyone that may have an issue with any of the places that I've seen us rezone anyway.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that point. And it's hard for me to not say something. So I would also say that just because it's an agreement that's attached to the land use in the NPS does not mean that property owner isn't subjected to other policies and bylaws that you have. So it's true what you say. If it's in the land use bylaw in the NPS, it has to abide by those rules. But we have noise bylaws or nuisance bylaws that have nothing to do with land use, but that any owner, regardless of whether they're in a development agreement or not, has to abide by that. I can't go crank my music at 100 all night long. There are rules associated with that. So that may or may not be land use. And in this case, the developer would have to abide by those just as you would as a resident. Okay.
Good. Thank you. Okay, one last call. Final questions, final comments? Okay, seeing none, we will conclude again our public hearing. Erin, are you sticking around for an agenda item a little bit later?
I wasn't
Nope,
advised.
okay.
I can if needed, certainly. But
No, I think we're good.
okay.
Okay, thanks,
Good
Erin.
night. Thanks. Night.
So we will call our executive council meeting to order. I had regrets from Councillor Boudreau. The number 2 invitation to stand and move is on the agenda as usual. Number 3, I'm sure you've had a chance to look at the agenda. Are there any errors or omissions, any additions to the agenda? Scott?
So I'd like to apologize to Chantal. I didn't put it on the agenda. I would like to add low carbon community funding requests to the agenda, and council can decide not to, but I'll tell you my little story here is I'm putting an application into the province. And when I went through the application process, the request, there's a checkbox that you need to kind of ask for permission for the extra funding. So the funding I'm looking for is 75% of the project. The province would pay for that, but the municipality would still be on hook for 25. 25%, correct? So right now, the figures that I've received from the province to do this feasibility study, and the feasibility study would be around changing our gas vehicles to electric vehicles, and also look at where we could install EV charging stations in the municipality. So what I'm trying to do is get a feasibility study so that when we get there that we're going to do those changes, we already have a report and ready to go for this municipality. So the cost that I've been told by the province is for a feasibility study of this size is going to be somewhere around 50 to 100,000. I took the happy medium that took 75. So the municipality would probably be on the hook for like 18 to 19,000 if the consulting firm charge is around 75,000. So I just want to put that on the agenda and we can talk about it.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will approve the agenda as amended. And we will put it under for decision, I would say.
Yeah, for decision.
Yep. 6E. Any conflicts of interest to declare? Does anybody have a conflict of interest with any of the items on the agenda? Seeing none, if you do have a conflict at some point, you can declare it at that time. Go ahead. No? Okay. Next, we have the adoption of the minutes for June 8th for our regular council meeting minutes. I know you've had a chance to read them. Any errors or omissions to those minutes? Nope. Seeing none, they will stand approved as such. Next, number 5, department head report. It says attachment, but if I refresh. Perfect. Pardon me? Sorry. Okay. You've had a chance to look at it. Are there any questions or comments on the report? Okay, seeing none. We don't need to approve that, do we? It's just an update, okay?
If council chooses to, we can accept the report, that
Okay.
it is received it as presented.
Do we have to
There's
make a
no
motion?
approval required.
Do we move, like, is that a motion or just? Okay.
Usually a motion to accept is not necessary. But
What do you think, Chantal? No, okay. Sorry. Let's keep going.
I've been overruled. I'm gonna look that up later.
It's good to have somebody like who knows, right? That's awesome. That's okay.
You've been overruled by Rob.
That makes me feel a lot better. Thanks for making me feel worse.
Oh, that's right.
We're going to change him to Chantal's rule
Yeah.
instead of Robert's.
It's good that we have somebody in the know.
Exactly.
All right, for number 6, for decision. So 6A is the approval of the development agreement at 30 Spinney Road. So that is the one that we just discussed. So any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Then we have for 6B, the first reading of a development agreement at 111 Head of Roberts Island Road. So we're looking to approve the first reading of that, so that the next step would be the public hearing, just as we did tonight for the other one. Have you all had the chance to look that one over? Are there any questions or comments on that one?
I would move to accept
to accept the first reading.
Do we have a seconded by Councillor Digdon? Questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. 6C, we have the water lending program. So we kind of had a discussion about this at our last meeting. We thought we were going to maybe be in a drought. It seems like this week has proven us maybe wrong. We're kind of still looking for the sun, but however, there is a possibility of it happening again. And we talked about how the costs that we had in our previous policy weren't high enough, especially now with COVID, the COVID considerations. We just didn't have enough funding in there for people to really be able to afford to get what they needed. So some of the thresholds have been, if you've read the memo, some of the thresholds have been increased. So instead of it was 15,000 to drill a well, now we're up to 22.5, and our cap has gone from 5 to 750,000, 500,000 to 750,000. So we're looking to see if we want to make a motion to increase those amounts so that we can, I guess, help more people, serve more people. So what's the wish of council? Somebody? Councillor Burke.
Yeah, I agree that we should. You just never know what the weather's gonna give us, so I think we should have that there just in case. If we don't use it, we don't use it, so I think it's good, it's prudent to have that, so I'd make the motion.
Do we have a seconder on the motion? Seconded by Councillor Surratt. Any other discussion, questions on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. 6D, summer meetings. Typically in the summer, we kind of put a pause on our meetings that we have. There is a proposal in front of us by Chantal to adjourn our 4 regular and executive meetings for the months of July and August. But on Tuesday, August 1st, we will have a special meeting because there are development agreements that are coming up. We're seeing more and more of them, so we don't want to limit ourselves during the summer. So there is a tentative meeting set for August 1st for a development agreement, and on that same day to consider another development agreement. So if that is okay with council, would somebody be willing to make that motion that we do this? So moved by Councillor Saulnier, seconded by Councillor Digdon. Questions or comments on that? Councillor Digdon.
Thank you. Just wondering if that would be available via Zoom if a person is not around, or if we could.
That's, yes, if I may. Yes, that's absolutely possible. We'll get you a hybrid option. No problem.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next, we have 6E, which is low carbon funding request. That would be Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of gave you the spiel at the start because I felt I had to explain why justify why I didn't put it on the agenda. But yeah, the request would be for council to consider. I would say up to 20,000 to do a feasibility study around changing our gas vehicles to electric vehicles. And in my proposal, it's like it would be like an action plan that would give us about 15 years to do that. It wouldn't be just kind of automatic that we're going to switch all those within a couple of years. And the other part of the feasibility study would also be to look at where we could install charging stations in the municipality. Currently, I think we only have one. We might have others, but I'm only aware of one. And I actually was speaking to the business owner, and he shared a few things with me because he's looking into putting in a few more of those. But there's challenges with the grid and with our infrastructure. So this feasibility study would also look at those pieces. What barriers would we have in the municipality to install these chargers? So it's not only looking at where we would install it, but what would be the barriers, potential partners. Maybe we could partner with a business owner that may take that on and pay some of the cost. We could also look at what other funding routes are there for us to tap into, so the feasibility study would be a little bit more broad and would look at all those avenues. So.
Are there any questions for Scott about that? Go ahead, Councillor Sonia.
Thank you. Scott, is this a provincial mandate?
Not right now. Like to change your gas vehicles to a electric, no, it's not mandated at all, no.
So I'm just trying to figure out, I know it'd be a project in progress, I guess, or whatever, but a vehicle now in the country, if you're living in the city all the time using it, it'd be relatively easy to keep it charged. But do you ever use your vehicles to go to the city and back, is what I'm saying?
At times we do for courses. There would be people that could be using our vehicles to go to the city and back.
So
Yes.
if it's all electric now, you might have a problem with that because you might have a charging station. So
Correct. The other piece, if people want to come here for a meeting from Halifax and they have an electric vehicle, they would have problems because we don't have any charging stations right now. So that would be it would be a +2 to have those. But yeah, you're right. There are challenges right now around with an EV vehicle. How far can you travel? Where can you go? There's limitations. So if we were to go with EV vehicles, we would have charging stations here on site for sure. That would be the number one priority for us to do that. So we could obviously use the vehicles. But it's
the essence of the question is to, I guess, to put light on how prepared Nova Scotia is for electric vehicles, which we're not. So it's going to take quite a while to phase that in.
Yeah, point well taken. And again, this is a feasibility study. Doesn't mean that we're actually doing it.
Right.
It's preparing ourselves for the future if we ever get mandated or if this is something we want to do. But let's face it, we've been a leader in green projects. First wind farm in Pubnico, first net zero building here. These are just, we may not think of ourselves as leaders in green energy projects, but we are. And this would just be another one to show that we are leaders here in the municipality.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Surratt.
Yes, Scott, don't take this personal. I know you wouldn't. I just wish, if it had been a couple of $1,000s, that's fine, but it could be up to $20,000. I wish we would have had some warning before, because it's quite a lot of money. I guess the other question would be, are you applying like in the next couple of weeks, or?
Yeah, good question. And I apologize that I
No.
wasn't able to bring this to council sooner. It's kind of there's an application, there's a checkbox, and I just want to kind of put that checkbox. The application deadline is actually tonight. So whether you say yay or nay, I can still kind of send the application in, just not put that checkbox and send it in. It still can be submitted. The chances of our getting approved are probably slim, but we can still do that.
Thank you, Scott.
Councillor D'Entremont.
So this feasibility study is for the municipality and our own vehicles, or is it a feasibility study for the whole municipality for looking for infrastructure and all the possibilities or not the possibilities, or?
So it would be for our own vehicles. Those would be the only vehicles that we could change to electric vehicles. But I think it would be wise to look at the municipality to where we could have these electric charging stations.
So is this feasibility study going to look at that?
Yes.
Okay, so for the whole municipality?
Yes.
Yeah. As far as, we're not talking, vehicles, I guess people will buy vehicles if they want to.
If they want to or not.
But if we have charging stations in place, well, that it will increase people's interest in buying these vehicles. And like you said, and I was thinking the same before you said it, was that, we've been leaders in green energy. We've got this building, First Wind Park in Nova Scotia. So, it's kind of a trend that we set for ourselves. And, I'm definitely intrigued about this project, so.
Thank you. Councillor Digdon?
Thank you. Of course, me, when I see stuff now, nosy maybe or whatever, I saw a vehicle in Yarmouth here 2 weeks ago, talking about how you can plan trips and that. I hauled up next to them at the charging station. There's a charging station in Yarmouth, and it had out of problems, actually out of country plates on it, and they were charging their vehicle. And I asked them about their trip and how it was going with the charging vehicle, with the chargers and stuff like that. And they said it takes a little more planning, and there's no saying it don't, to make sure that you're not somewhere out on the side of the road. But they came right from New York down to Yarmouth, and that with a vehicle strictly run by power, and they had a good trip. They were just sitting there, two ladies in the car reading the book while their car was charging, and they said everything was going well. So I'm all in favor. Of course, the first thing I ask our CAO, do we have that $20,000 available if we have to come up with it? Because I know sometimes the funding's not there, or we can't find the funding.
So I'd say that the funding would come from reserve. It wouldn't come out of your current year operation, number one. Number two, it's a conditional funding situation. So we're assessing the probability of success, and I mean, we're realistic. It's not always great. There's usually more people applying than there is money. So this could be a very, very good application and could be funded, but there is the possibility that it won't. And of course, it's conditional on approval. We wouldn't do this unless we had funding from the province. Third, the motion that's being requested is up to 20,000. That's an assumption based on an application. So the application says it might cost you 75. Well, it might cost you 50. It might cost you 100. I doubt, not for what we're trying to do here, because we're really strictly talking about Argyle and the potential of electrification. So, probability of it being 50 might be higher than 75. We don't know for sure. But I guess my point is 25% of 50 is less than 20% of 75, which is what you're being asked for here today. So I would say that if we required the money, it would come out of capital reserve, and it would potentially set us up for additional funding in the case where the feasibility study said this is a really good idea and you should do it. It would set us up for additional funds if we wanted to set up charging stations for the community, not just for us. Without this is like phase one, right? Without this, we wouldn't have a chance at the other stuff. So it's not budgeted, right? Because we didn't expect this to happen at the time of budget. So that's why it's a request coming from you in this way. And it is rather quickly, I understand. And these things unfortunately do happen with funding requests. You don't always expect everything. And sometimes you go through checklists, and then you go through checklist 10, you're like, oh crap, we just did 1 to 9 and 10 just popped up. And just that happens to be something we need from council. So that's what happens there. And I hope the money's there. If you wish to use it for that purpose, the money will be found out of reserve.
Well, it seems like Councillor D'Entremont said, green it's the way people are going, whether we want to be part of it or not. The Prime Minister is on the news every second night talking about it. I'd make a motion that we go and that up to a maximum of, I'll say 25,000, and that for our 25%.
Okay, thank you.
this
Is there a
application.
seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor D'Entremont. Councillor Surratt, you had?
I was gonna make a motion.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments on that? Seeing none. Councillor Saulnier.
Slid that one in.
You did.
To Councillor Digdon's point, our man in the big house in Ottawa putting this new carbon tax. It would seem to me that federal government would have some kind of obligation to help provinces and municipalities for funding. Is there such a thing, or is it something you could look into?
At this point, I'm not aware, but I'm sure there will be some green energy project coming out in regards to the new tax, and we'll definitely look into that.
All right, thanks.
Councillor Digdon.
And I was thinking the same thing. I'm just hoping that us being proactive is the way to go. So I'm hoping this 25% that we may be putting in might get us a return of like 35% or so when they, that's all.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Number 7, correspondence and for information, 7A, Mariner Center expansion. Believe it or not, I did not put that on.
Would you like me to expand on that?
Well,
the
yes,
expansion?
I'm not sure what you wanted to expand on, but go ahead.
This really is really coming out of the work that I've been doing in the EPC, and it's going to be very, very high level because there's a lot going on that really I can't comment on because it's ongoing. So the communication is starting to ramp up more now. I think we went a little dark for a while because we were waiting on information, and even the role of the MCEB was rather quiet as well because there was a lot of information we needed to gather from our consultants in order to actually present something. So I'll say that as early as last week, we had a presentation, or I guess a triple meeting, I guess, between the elected officials that are responsible for the project, the working committee, EPC, and also the fundraising committee. So that's a new one. Not to say it's new to us, but it's not. They're technically not part of the decision making tree that has been set up on this project. They are very interested in this project and very committed to a substantial fundraising result. We're probably going to get an official announcement on that rather soon, but it is more than what we expected. We expected 10% of the project being 3 million. It might be twice that they are prepared to commit. I hesitate to give you a number and an official one because that's not really up to me. That's up to the fundraising committee and everything. You can set a price, but you have to deliver as well, and that's a challenge that again the fundraising committee has. We talked about different options. The fundraising committee had some interesting ideas around what their needs might be and how that would maximize their ability to go get the money. So it's kind of another arm here in the sense that it's a $30 million project that we funded without fundraising, but fundraising is saying if you do certain things, it might maximize our ability to go get the money. So that is an ongoing conversation. We hope to bring them in a little closer, not to design with us, because there's already a lot of cooks in the kitchen, as you might have imagined. And communication's always tough. It's always tough. It's never good enough. So we're saying, why don't we lean on each other here and just figure out where we can play in this project. Very, very impressive group of people. There's also a very impressive group of people in the working group as well as the MCEB. So we're not short on good people. So that's a good thing. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to get a lot more information. One will be there's still options on design on the table. Initially, we went out and said, here's design A, design B, which one works best for you? And we picked one. And we brought that to the MCEB, and the MCEB said, okay, that sounds pretty good. Let's go price it. Okay. So when we priced it, we realized that we are over budget on that price. Not surprising to anyone, but not considerably over either. Okay. So keep in mind, these are early stages. When we talk about projects at this level, it is not in the detail required to be accurate. So for instance, at the end of this project, they might say, well, there's 84 lights, right? At this much a light. But at this stage, it's like, we need lights. right? So let's put a number in for lights, and then let's put in a guess in, just to make sure that we're not too far off. So are they experienced? Absolutely. They do good work. We've got a third-party estimator to help us through this process. So we are over in the early stages of this. We are over budget. That may change, but it's an indication that that the fundraising money is very important in order for us to have a project. Because if we're over 30, we don't have that confirmed by anyone. So fundraising is going to lean in. We'll see what happens. At the same time, because the design was over budget, it's our responsibility to go back to the table a little bit and take a look at what's being designed. And so, you know, where I said we had A, B, and we picked maybe B, maybe A has to be revisited. Or there might be another option that we may have to revisit. And this is all a consequence of the fact that we don't have that the current design as we propose and as they developed is not meeting the budget right now. It doesn't mean it won't, but we have some work to do. So I just want to let you know that's where we are. In the next 3 weeks, we'll get a lot more information. I feel the MCEB is starting to catch up to the communication, but we need to step up to that. And also we need to understand what the communication might be outside. So we always have the issue of, well, what do you tell people if you can't tell them anything, right? Because if you're working on something, you know, put out a press release saying we're still working, it's not very interesting. But if you say nothing, then, you know, somebody might say something for you, right? So so we're really kind of working on that, and like we understand the importance of that. We also understand the importance of community input, and I don't say engagement because we can't ask the community to tell us what to do. We've been tasked to figure out what to do, but what we don't know is what the usership would say if we gave them a plan. So if we gave a plan for aquatics, we should talk to the aquatics people who are in as users and say, does this make sense? If it's fitness, we bring them in, they take a look, they're like, well, you missed something. Oh, I didn't know. We need that information from them, not to say it's too small or it's too big, because that's a confine that really, like if it's too small for a reason. It's because we couldn't afford to have it bigger. These things always do, you know, maybe 70 to 90, hopefully 90% of what you wanted. They never do 100% of what you wanted, because 100% of what you want is always too expensive. So, and we're in post-COVID times, which means that there's a lot of unpredictability around who might even be interested in this. Like, and I don't want to scare you too bad, but like we've seen this with the municipality where we've put out tenders and things far less complicated than this, and it's nothing, silence, because there's no contractor that has the time to do it. And so that we have to keep that in mind, that some of this has to do with the ability for somebody to be able to do this. Timing the project might be a critical piece here as we move forward. So I'll say that in the future, the communication was going to improve a lot more. I would like for you all as funders to understand that there is the possibility later on, not today, that the MCEB may call upon you to consider a change of scope or commitment, because our plan was that the MCEB would make all the decisions until such time as the scope would change, or if the requirement for more money would change. I'm not suggesting we need more municipal money right now, but I need to warn you that possibility could be. We know that there's a variety of other funders that could be tasked here as well. It's not just municipalities that are involved here. There's federal government, provincial government. We're going to do our very best to go and take a look at the situation. And again, we don't know what we don't know until the tender comes. So you can guess all you want, but then when the tenders come in, that's when the rubber hits the road. And that might be where we have to make some further adjustments to the project if it's too far the wrong way. This is a very complicated and very exciting project at the same time. I'm going to stop there. I'm sure you have questions. I'm not sure I can answer all of them, but I will. I can say that right now is a very heavy time for getting the communication and the work done rather quickly, because we're at a point at the end of July where we're likely going to call an all council meeting to say, here's where we are. Here are our options. Here are the pros and cons. Here's what we're going to do. Okay, so a report will be done, a rather large one will be done to benefit the MCEB. And the hope is it's an all council meeting, but that the MCEB, I will say this, that when the MCEB has a meeting, it's just like any other meeting of a regional committee. Any of you are able to join, even if you're not on the membership. So we're going to double down and make sure that you are aware of these meetings and that you have appropriate time to consider your schedule if you want to participate as a listener, right? So we don't always do that well because, again, there's a lot of players, but we're going to double down on our commitment. As it was less important then, it's a lot more important now that you be engaged. So I'll stop there, and if there's any questions, I'll do my best.
Councillor Surratt.
If I recall, the fundraising money was supposed to be used not for the project, but for I shouldn't say not for the project, but it wasn't going to go for the build. Maybe that's kind of what I understood. Maybe I'm wrong, I can be corrected. You know, I was at the meetings, if I remember right. Can you tap in that fundraising money to put on the project?
Yes, the quick answer is yes. But I
Was
think
I
you're
right in the first part that I said?
Yeah, you were. In
Yeah.
the sense, in a certain sense, you were, because I think that the fundraising committee always looked at their role, and I'm speaking for them. Perhaps I shouldn't, but I think they've seen their role as enhancing the
Yes.
project.
That's the word.
So they would see, the aquatic center, for instance, and they might say, well, the leisure pool has to be bigger and better, and so they would focus their effort on doing that. They're not interested in just saying general fundraising for the canteen. They're not really that interested in that. But in the end, it's a project.
Yes.
It's like a candy cane. It's hard to separate the white from the red. So if they want an
I like
enhanced
that.
walk, right? If they want an enhanced walking track, they might say, well, our fundraising is to improve your walking track, but it's still enhancing the project.
Thank you, Anna.
Councillor Sonia.
Thank you. So you're over budget. I don't necessarily want to know what the plans are, but I guess it was discussed before that might be a walking track and all that. And that walking track would not just be a track, you'd have to probably design the building to take that track.
Right.
I guess my question is there, I don't need to know if there's going to be a walking track, but is there room to cut it back and still have the swimming pool that people are wanting?
Right. I'm going to address your question in the best way that I can using the scope ladder that has been approved. The scope ladder was very clear in the order upon which we would invest. Number one was aquatics. Inside of that, there were 3, maybe 4 things. There was a 6-lane pool. There was the leisure pool. There was the hot tub. And I believe like the amenities, like the things that you might need, like you need change rooms. You're not just going to walk in there without having a change room. So that's like your aquatic side. And then your number 2 is your fitness. So that fitness would include all things that you might see in a fitness facility, yoga, whatever, yoga room. There's it's a gym, right? Not a gym as in like basketball, but like it's a gym. And then I think the third one was, I might get this order wrong, but I believe number 3, according to the counselors, was the walking track. And then a close 4 was the net zero ready work. So I would say that the net zero ready work was a condition of the federal government funding. So that might move its way up the line if we thought that it would hurt the funding from the federal government. So it might be that you want something ahead of that, but you may not have much of a choice because there are conditions associated with the federal funding, and which, by the way, is the biggest number of them all at almost 16 million. So to your point, if we're over budget, a variety of things have to be asked. So if you design it in the best way possible with the involvement of everybody that you feel should be involved, and you're at 36 million or 30, let's say 38 million, okay, you can go to the fundraising committee and say, can you find 8 million? That would bring you to 38. They might say yes, and they might say no. They might not be able to do that. They might say yes and not be able to. Because it's fundraising. So there's that. There's we can't afford to cut this anymore. Again, this is a decision of the elected officials at this point. We can't cut this project anymore. This is what it is. We're not going to cut anymore. We thought we could do it for less. We can't. So the 3 municipal units have to pony it up. So if, let's say, the fundraiser goes to 6, we've got 2 left. The municipal units are going to be asked to either fund it or find it. So that's a possibility. The other possibility is that this is just too big. And the walking track is just something we cannot afford right now. And we need to cut the thing that's lowest on the list. And in this case, I'm illustrating that it could be the walking track. I don't want to make any judgments on this. And so if that's $2 million, well, that brings you to 36 million. And you've got the 6 million from the funding raising. And so for no additional cash of your own, you have a project. And maybe you design it such that you could add a walking track if you had the money later. So sometimes you phase things in. So it's hard to answer this question accurately, but I can tell you that there is an order. And I can tell you that some things can come off and that will depend on where the money is coming from and where it can come from. You know, look, you might say, hey, we're in for 30% of 2 million. And the town might say, we're out. And so what do you do then? Right? So there's a lot to it, unfortunately. So I hope that's helpful in some way without confusing you more.
Councillor Digdon.
And, the only thing I was thinking about when I pushed it maybe, but you might have said it right at the end, to fund it or find it or vote against it. Because we initially went in with what we thought was our share towards it. And all of a sudden, if they come back, we do have the option, not saying we'd ever use it, but we do have the option to say, listen, this is what we agreed to.
Yeah.
And that's where we are going to be.
Correct. Every individual unit has the individual right to control their individual contributions. This is exactly why the MCEB does not make that decision. You do. So you may be for it and 2 others against. You might have 2 for, 2 against. All these things could happen. So, but your commitment right now today is 30.67% of 10 million,
That's right.
which is 3.067 million. That's your commitment. And if you're unwilling to go any further, that might be a discussion for the future. We may not have to have it today. We certainly shouldn't, because
No,
we don't know.
We don't know.
But that is an option. Yes, it's an option.
Yeah.
Say this much and no more.
Because just when you said to fund it or find it, but there is a third option as well. Yeah.
Well, and again, that's correct, because if you don't fund it and you don't find it, then you have to reduce the scope of the project to have it fit
That's right.
into the cost.
Thank you.
Yep.
I guess the one less exciting thing that I can add to that is that we do have our community member to the MCEB. We actually, we had criteria that we had to, that they submitted resumes and criteria by which we assessed and evaluated, and Chantal was amazing, of course, in helping us with that. 3 names were submitted with the highest scores, and we selected Jake McClay. I'm not sure if you know Jake McClay. He lives in Yarmouth, but he had scored the highest. So he has joined our committee. Less exciting, but that's one thing I can add. 7B, boundary review. So the attachment is there. Basically, what we applied for was accepted. But I think we figured it would be. Right? Because we had the evidence to back ourselves up. So we'll remain at 9 councillors, 9 districts with some changes to some of the boundaries, my district being one of them being changed. Then we have 7C, introduction of bill to amend the Accord Acts. I read through this one. I guess the question I have is that I always worry about our fishery when these types of things come forward. That's always what I worry about, but I don't know. Do we know any more on this? Like, is this just like the initial stages and CAO Muse?
We don't know very much.
Okay,
I know about as much as you do, and if you feel uninformed, welcome.
okay, okay.
Welcome to the club. I would say that if you do have a concern around this, that it would be appropriate to it's an appropriate time to not to debate, whether this is good or not. But I think it's like if you've got concerns about fishing, it might not be a bad idea to write to them and say,
Mhm.
we'd like to know, in doing this, has the fishing been considered or
Right.
whatever, just to raise that issue. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at this point, but I really don't have a lot of information on this at this time.
Councillor Digdon?
Actually, I'd make that a motion because I had the same thoughts, that we live in some of the richest fishing grounds around. And I feel as though I'd definitely like to have input or some more answers at some point in time from the people that could really affect and really can affect us all. There's no saying it can't. So I definitely, I believe a letter to that organization would be good, and to see what they can tell us about where they plan on
So asking if they've considered the effects.
of the fishery
fishery.
and what it may do and stuff like that, and if they looked at that in their plans. Yeah.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Councillor Board. Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Motion carried. Next, we have financial requests for our district community grants. The first one is for the Plymouth Cemetery, $500 for District 2. Who would like to make that motion?
I would like to make a motion for the Plymouth Cemetery for $500.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion carried. The next one is for $500 in District 3 for Le Club des Acadiens Senior de Wedgeport. Is there somebody willing to make that motion?
I will make that motion on behalf of Councillor Woodrow. He asked me to do this, a motion for a grant for the Club des Acadiens Senior de Wedgeport.
Seconded by Councillor Danchemo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, motion carried. 8C, Argyle Historic Church Building, $500, District 6. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. And the West Pubnico Athletic Association, $500 for District 9.
I'll make that motion. The West Pubnico Athletic Association is a nonprofit organization in West Pubnico. We're asking you as counselor, me, for a district community grant. This is basically to, the West Pubnico Athletic Association is the owner of what we used to call the Field de Nord, the ball field, North ball field, which is, I guess, in disrepair. And we got a couple of lots of land there that we want to sell and dissolve the organization after that. So I'll make a motion that we give them $500. So.
Seconded by Councillor Digdon. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Number 9, agenda topics for next meeting or notice of motion by councillors. Nothing, see none. Then we have question period. Nope, we're good. And number 11, in camera. All right.